Hi everyone. First of all, can everyone hear me correctly? Even over there? Everyone is good, right? Okay. My name is Nuno, and I'm here today to speak to you about writing effective PHP. Writing effective PHP is my opinionated way on defensive programming. I believe that developers today, they code assuming that others do not commit mistakes. And defensive programming is quite of the opposite of this. You code assuming that others may commit mistakes. So you protect your code against bad practices, but also against bad usages. You assume the worst. When you enter in this mood of defensive programming, you assume that every single line of code can be a liability. If you want me to make an analogy here, defensive programming is just like driving. When you drive safe, you drive careful. When you are with your family, before you advance, you look at the left and you look at the right. You are really careful. So defensive programming is just like driving. I'm about to give you a set of practices that if you follow them, they'll get you in the habit of writing robust, testable, safe, and maintainable code. Because at the end of the day, what we all want is ship code to production that prevents every possible bug within your application. Now, keep in mind, it's important to notice that practices always depend from the team in the context. In the practice that I'm about to give you, they are defensive practices. Most of the time you don't need them, but sometimes you do. And that practices always depend from the context. There is no such thing as practices by default. They are not up to preference. That being said, let's get started. Okay, so today we are working together with two objects. The first object is the class money. Can everyone see? Yeah, it's big enough, right? Yeah. The first class is the class money, which in the money is a simple value object that represents the money. In this specific situation, it carries the amount of money that you can pass through the constructor. Later, if you want, you can set a different amount. And you also have a getter here to get the current amount. So the money, a simple value object. Then you have the money sender. And the money sender, on the other hand, is a class that carries some behavior with her, which means that you can actually pass the money through the constructor, the money value object, and call this method handle to actually send the money to somebody else. So we have the money and the money sender. Pretty simple. Now let's use this code within a simple route in your web application. If you have a scenario where you want to send $100 and then you want to send $50, you probably will do some code like this. You would create one money value object with $100 and then send it to this first money sender. Then you will set a different amount to 50 and create a second money sender with those $50. Afterwards, you call the method handle in both money senders, and you expect to send $100 at first and $50 again afterwards. The problem is, when you run this code in production, I'm actually sending $50 twice, which goes against the code I have just written. Now, when you look at this code, at first glance, everything should work as expected. Now, what's wrong here? Why are we sending $50 twice? The reason is the money value object is being shared between those two money senders, which means that when you set a different amount on the money value object, you are actually setting a different amount for both money senders. And that's why we are sending $50 twice. And this leads us to the first tip. Make state immutable. And this is a very common thing when you work with languages such as C# and Java because you need to have safety. On the other hand, with languages such as PHP and Python, you don't need to have safety. Still, having mutable classes is the reason of many bugs in the industry of software. For those who don't know, an immutable class cannot change after being created. On the other hand, a mutable class can change after being created. So if we take a look at this, we can clearly see that the money value object can change after being created. It's not immutable. But if you take a close look, you can understand that if this object has been immutable from the first place, this bug would never happen, because I wouldn't be able to change the state. Now, how can you make immutable objects from the very first place to avoid this kind of bugs and to be preventive, to be defensive? The rule of thumb is the constructor is the only injection point. You can only change state within the constructor. That means no public attributes, no setters, and you make sure the state remains private. Now, once you code this object, the new developer within your team, you will be forced to create a new instance of the money value object if he wants to work with a different amount. And now the code obviously works as expected. We are sending 100 bucks in the very first thing. We could agree that if the code has been immutable from the first place, this bug would never happen. So let's recap this chapter. How can you write immutable classes? The constructor is the only injection point. That means no setters, private attributes, and you make sure the state remains private. Okay? Let's move to the second chapter. Always assert. As a new developer entering this code, nothing prevents me to actually come here and set a negative amount of money. And when I do this, I'm clearly sending minus $50 in production, which is something that I shouldn't do within this application. And this question of be defensive comes over again. Why, as a new developer, I'm able to pass a negative amount of money here? Shouldn't be the job of the person who have coded this money value object make sure that arguments have always a valid state. Make sure that when somebody works with my object will always have a valid state. And to ensure that, it's actually very simple. You just validate the input through the arguments. So here, if the amount is negative, you will throw something like an invalid argument exception. You might want to create your own exception for your own domain. I'm using this type of exception because I want to keep it simple. And you would write something like, the amount must be positive. Now, the developer who is working your code would immediately see these kind of exceptions. And he knows I cannot pass a negative amount. I actually need to work with a positive amount here. And again, you'll be forced, because you are defensive, to pass a positive amount. And once you do it, the code works as expected. But we agree that if you were defensive for the very first place, this bug would never happen. When you should do it? Every time you code a new object, you should always validate the input from the other users. And if you think it's too much code, you might want to build your own helpers to avoid some code duplication. Or if you are like me, just consider this package called Barbelay Assert. I will share the slides at the very end so you can take the name of the package. But it allows you to do stuff like this. If you want to create something and you want to make sure the name is not empty, you can just call assertion not empty. Or since PHP is not strongly typed and you want to make sure that objects have always the same type, you can validate that as well. Pretty cool. Now let's move to the third chapter. And this one is more if you do open source like me. It's called, if you have a public API, make sure you have a clear contract. Now, keep in mind that this public API I'm mentioning here is not the public API from your REST HTTP layer. It's more the public API of your classes, of your code. And this clear contract is the way that you specify how people should interact with your code. Okay? So let's take a look at our example here. Do this code have a clear contract? I don't think so, because when I'm looking at this code, when I'm using this code from the open source, what exactly amount is? I have no idea. It can be an integer, it can be a float, it can be an object. We don't know. And same goes not only for the signature, but also for the behavior. If I come here to this method handle, what exactly handle is doing? Is creating a database record? Is sending an email? We are not sure. And also for the context of open source, if the public contract it's not clear, people don't know when you should do a major or a minor version. You don't know how to follow semantic versioning at all. Okay? So how can you declare that really clear contract so everyone is aware how we interact with your code? It's as simple as writing PHP docs. So let's go to this class here, and that's had something called this value. This is a value object that represents the money. Now, this sounds simple, but once you do this, people know exactly that this object doesn't have any behavior. It's just an object that carries some state about the money. You, of course, document all the public methods, and this would be creates a new instance of money, doesn't have any side effect. The amount is an integer that must be positive. And you also say, be careful though, because I may throw an invalid argument exception if you don't respect the contract, which is passive positive amount. It's negative. Now, once you have this, everything is so much clearer. People don't need to go to your code. People sometimes say, code should speak for itself. And I think that's completely, I mean, all right. Anyway, once you have this, it's very clear how people can interact with your code. It's very clear as for you, if you follow semantic versioning, to know when you should do a major version or a minor version. Now, as I have said, not only for the signature, but also for the behavior. So here, you'd write something like creates a new database record and sends an email. People know exactly what's the behavior of this method. And you, as an open source developer, if tomorrow you change the behavior of the method, if you come here to the contract and if you say it's no longer sending an email, it's a major version, it's a breaking change. You need to do a major version of your package. And to go really clear about the granularity that I want you to put in the public contract, I'm going to show another example. Here I have this admin repository where you can get a list of emails. Now, what people usually do is that they say returns a list of emails, and they usually do stuff like this, returns an array. Now, is this clear? I mean, what's the type of the array? What is the values that the array contains? We have no idea looking at this code, and some people actually do this. Is a list of strings. Now, as a developer, if I come here and actually send a key that contains the name of the user, I'm not changing the contract, because this is also valid for this type of situations. This usually is not a good indicative. So what you can do, what I'm actually doing all the time, is specifying that this is an array that contains a string, which is the key, but also a string, which is the value. And now, all the structure of the array is really clear. Okay? This type of annotations, they are supported by PHPSTAN, PHPStorm, and all the tools that you love. And since you are talking about PHP docs, do not write PHP docs like this. Okay? PHP docs are part of your source code, and they are not funny, they are not meant to be funny, they are meant to specify the public API. Now, one core principle about defensive programming is that you never hide bugs from the software. If something is not available, if something is not working as expected, you always throw an exception and you let the software know about what's going on. It's not up to you to decide if you should ignore errors, if you should log something. It's up to the software to decide what to do with exceptions, with side effects. Okay? So if you use semantic versioning, please take a close look at this chapter because it's really important. And to write a solid contract, to recap, you write what it is, what it does, what it returns, what's the behavior, but also what's the behavior when you don't respect the contract, which is the exception that we just saw, that we are always throwing exceptions if something is wrong. Okay? Let's move on to another chapter. Make classes final by default. I'm not sure about the Symfony community, but in a Laravel community, this topic has been discussed a lot. Almost every single day, I would say. And we discuss it because some people agree that we should mark classes final by default. Other people don't. Now, what is a final class? A final class is a class that cannot be extended. So if you have a final class, you cannot create another one that extends that final class. PHP will forbid it. Now, in my opinion, if you want to be defensive, mark classes as final. For two reasons. In the context of open source, you might want to mark classes as final to hide the internals of your class. Basically, when you do open source, concerning the maintainability, you want to have the smallest public API as possible to have less code out there. And when you mark classes as final, you forbid inheritance. That being said, you mean you can refactor the internals of your code confidently. Now, on the context of your web application that most of the people actually work with, I also see a value on it, and I want to show you it today. Now, an open question to the audience. Is this software well designed? I think everyone here in the room would say, this software is not well designed. I can promise you that some people have done code like this. Still, most people would say, this code is not well designed. It clearly violates object-oriented programming. Object-oriented programming wasn't made to build stuff like this. For those of you who are actually confused, I made another analogy here. Just because Nuno needs food doesn't mean that Nuno is food. Okay? Just because you need to have a method eat within Nuno doesn't mean that Nuno is food. And this is what some developers do to solve problems. They need to have a method eat within Nuno, and the fastest way to accomplish that is just extend from food. Now, this clearly violates object-oriented programming. It wasn't meant to build code like this. Nuno wasn't meant to be eaten. So how can you enforce these kind of things from not happen? You, as a developer of the class food, you mark the class food as final. When you do that, you make a statement. You say, I'm building this code, and this code wasn't meant to be extended. I forbid inheritance. Now, the new developer within your team, when it comes to this code, you will think, all right, I need to implement a method eat. I cannot solve my problem using inheritance, so I'll be forced to use composition instead. You'll be forced to actually pass food under the constructor of Nuno or under the heat method. So we agree that marking classes final by default is a great way to enforce good practices. When you should do it, I would say always. And you force this way your team, your developers, to think about composition. We may have some cases where abstraction, it might make sense, but that is a whole new topic. Now, on top of these practices that I'm about to show you, one very good thing is have high quality tests. Because we often hear that I do have 100% test coverage, so my code is safe. Maybe not, okay? And I'm going to show you an example. Let's go here to this handle method, and I have actually prepared a piece of code for you. Let me just uncomment here. Hola. By the way, I do speak French. It's just my French is not as technical as my English. It's kind of the street French. Anyway. All right, looking at this code. Actually, let me add the void here. By the way, type into your code when it's possible. Looking at this code, how many tests do you need to have 100% test coverage? All right, looking at this code, I would say you need at least 2 tests. Okay? One that tests the exception, and another one that tests the behavior, that the money was actually sent. Now, it's important to know that high-quality testing is about testing all the possible outcomes of a method. And looking at this, I have 2 possible outcomes. One for the exception, another one for when I'm actually sending money. Okay? The thing is, 100% test coverage is about statement coverage here in PHP community. So if I come here, if I'm actually returning a Boolean instead of a void, if you run your PHP test coverage, you will still get 100% test coverage with only 2 tests. Still, how many outcomes we have now? We have 3 possible outcomes, just changing the return type from a void to a Boolean. And why is that? So we have 1 outcome for the exception, 1 outcome when I'm returning false, another outcome when I'm returning true. So now, just with this small changing, we have 3 possible outcomes, even though with 2 tests we had 100% test coverage, the fake one. So having 3 tests is kind of the real one if you really want to have a high-quality testing within your application. Let me just put the code as it was before. Okay. So is in this moment that you know that you cannot return, you should return a void instead of a Boolean and everything, is in this moment that you will be imploring for having less features. Because you know, having more features leads to more tests. Returning a void is different from returning a Boolean. So you know that when you have more features, you need more tests. So what you want is actually implore for having less features and reducing your code to the bare minimum of what you need. Okay? Now, one last thing. On this chapter of high-quality testing, we have something called static analysis. Now, it's important to know that static analysis is a quite new topic for the PHP community, but has been there for ages in other languages, like C# and Java. We call it the compiler. Right? The compiler, among other things, is just something that goes to your code and checks if there is bugs. Okay? Something emerging in the PHP community for some years now, it's something we call static analysis that performs the job of a compiler of finding bugs in your code within milliseconds, sometimes. So, and this is coming in Python and Ruby and all those languages. And today I'd like to show you PHPSTAN in PHP Insights. So let's get started with PHPSTAN. So if I come here, if I actually launch PHPSTAN, everyone knows PHPSTAN, by the way? Raise your hand if you know PHPSTAN. Okay, a couple hands, not everyone. You will find something very nice today, I can tell you. So I launched PHPSTAN within my terminal, and I don't find any problems in my code. Now, I come back to my code, and here I'm going to actually pass a string instead of an integer. Now, we all agree that this is incorrect. You shouldn't be able to pass a string. A string is not an amount of money. If I come back into my terminal, take a look. Within milliseconds, PHPSTAN was able to tell me, hey, you are passing a string to the class money, and I do expect an integer. Within milliseconds, you have a tool that is able to find bugs for you within your code. It's not this thing massive. When I found this like last year, it blew my mind, basically. Let me show another example. I'm going to try to create a class that doesn't exist. The DFG, whatever, doesn't exist. I run PHPSTAN, and it tells me, hey, you are trying to create a class that doesn't exist. And again, instead of having your whole team in the Friday night debugging both bugs in production, you have a tool that you can cable in your CI. You don't ship bugs at all to production. And for those of you who actually use PHPSTAN and know PHPSTAN, you guys know that I'm just scratching the surface about what PHPSTAN can offer you. You can go so much deeper with PHPSTAN. Okay? Okay. So this was PHPSTAN. I highly recommend you to put this tool in your project and probably get a little bit surprised. Let me show another tool. Who knows PHP Insights? Oh, okay, like 3%, not bad. So let me tell you that PHP Insights was a project that I've started 4 months ago. Now it's been maintained by the community and myself as well. But I started PHP Insights a couple of months ago. PHP Insights have more than 3,000 stars on GitHub. And they have thousands of downloads right now. So let me show what PHP Insights is about. Get ready. All right. You can see PHP Insights as PHPCS with steroids and a beautiful interface. Okay? So it gives you this really nice overview about your application and about what's going on. So we have, just to get started, we have 4 metrics here. Code quality, complexity, architecture, but also about the styling. And this last one, the styling, is really tailored per framework. Now, keep in mind that the styling conventions for WordPress, they are way different from Symfony, and the other way around. So all the metrics here, they are tailored for framework. If you launch this project within a Laravel or a Symfony, a bunch of specific metrics of those frameworks will be loaded. Now, we know that concerning the code quality, we have about 145 lines. Let me actually just reset the project. I actually forgot to do that. Okay. So we know that most of our code is actually comments, which is a good indicative that probably I'm documenting correctly my code. I also know that I have a complexity of this average right here. Now, who knows what cyclomatic complexity is about? Raise your hand. Okay. For those who don't know, I'm going to try to make an analogy here, very simple. Basically, when you have a method, which is a straight line like this, with only one possible outcome, the cyclomatic complexity will be 1. Now, if you have a method with an if condition inside, two outcomes can happen already when you enter in the if condition, when you don't. And that would be cyclomatic complexity of 2. Now, this specific number is the average of cyclomatic complexity that you have in your whole application. And this is especially useful when you cable this to your CI, and you can make sure that no one is making a pull request that makes your application more complex, which is quite awesome. Then we have the architecture, and this is more like the structure of your app. So here I know that I do have, most of my stuff is actually classes, and I don't have any interface. Probably this is not a package, because if it's a package, don't having interfaces is a problem. Okay? Here, I have the percentage of coding style. As I have told you, everything is tailored per framework. And finally, the security issues of my app. Once you have this really nice overview, we have an idea about how your app is, and you can start actually clicking enter to see some code issues. Now, take a close look. By default, PHP Insights points you in the right direction. Remember all the tips that I have given you at the very beginning of this talk, like making state immutable, don't use public properties, don't use setters? Everything is in this specific CLI tool. So you have a clear idea about what you should do, what you don't. All right? At least this is my opinionated tool. That's why you have this kind of ints to do. You have here as well that it's missing a declare strict type, so probably you should add it at the beginning of your file to make your code more strict. So I basically point you in the direction of being defensive here concerning the code quality. Then you click on enter and you can see what exactly file is complex. So here, for example, I know that this specific file have 8 of cyclomatic complexity, which is more than allowed, is forbidden. And I know that I should refactor this specific file to make it simple for my next developer. Okay? Then I click on enter. And I can see my architectural issues. And let me recap. This is really about how your code is structured. So looking at this example, I'm seeing that I have a class which has 11 methods. I should consider refactor this class. Of course, you have a config file you can ignore sometimes. Sometimes you just don't have an option. And you have a function which is too long. I may consider refactoring this, split it at multiple files. So it gives you really nice hints about what parts of your code need to be refactored or improved. And finally, styling issues. And this is really about white spaces, a line that have too many characters. It's really about those kind of things. Tailored per framework, always. In the very end, we have security concerns. And this is more like packaging security concerns. And here I'm seeing that I do have the Symfony HTTP Foundation within a version that has a security concern. So I should probably upgrade this specific package within my composer.lock. So really nice tool, and this is PHP Insights. You can start using it right away. Just go to Google and write PHP Insights. Seems really nice. And if you have feedback, of course, don't hesitate to perform a pull request, create an issue, etc. Now, let me tell you that PHPSTAN and PHP Insights are some of the static analysis tools. There is so much more in the PHP ecosystem. But please, do not ignore static analysis. Every time you ignore static analysis within your app, you are losing money. That's 100% sure. Okay? Let's recap this chapter of high-quality testing. You need to have 100% real test coverage with PHP unit, and consider and use and abuse static analysis for PHPSTAN with PHPSTAN and PHP Insights, or many others that they're using the PHP ecosystem. Now, the practices and tools that I just give it to you, you should consider them. There are a few contexts that I do see the value of them, and you should really consider them in those specific contexts. Me, at Algolia, I am an open source developer, so I do apply these practices all the time. Another context that you might want to apply those practices is in important pieces of your software. If you are handling other people's money, like the example I just showed you, you might want to be safe there. As well, if you have a project that you want to live more than a year, you might want to have a high-quality test suite that covers all the possible situations so you can refactor, change framework. Okay? If you don't have a high-quality test suite, it can be dangerous. Okay? And to finish, I would like to talk about a word that means a lot to me. It was really difficult at my early beginnings, which is experience. We often hear that experience is about the number of years that you spend at your job. Now, I can tell you that experience is just about choosing the right practices and the right tools for your project. Experience is really about being knowledgeable to understand when you should apply defensive practices or not. That is what experience is about. If you like my talk, I'm building a video course called the Writing Effective PHP. You can find it under nunomaduro.com. And this web course is designed to help you getting in the habit of writing robust, test, and safe code. I can promise you that once you have this course, you are going to take PHP very seriously. Okay? Thank you so much.
Merci beaucoup, Nuno. On a un tout petit peu moins de 5 minutes pour des questions-réponses. Donc, si quelqu'un a une question, Nuno est capable de répondre en français ou en anglais.
C'est comme tu veux, là. Je rigole.
Oui.
Merci. Merci pour la présentation, c'était super. Est-ce que PHP Insight peut s'appliquer sur des tests, sur des classes de tests, et est-ce que ça a un sens?
Alors, de mon point de vue, désolé pour mon français déjà, j'applique pas PHP Insight dans ma test suite. Une raison principale, c'est que ma test suite elle a un cyclomatic complexity assez énorme, parce qu'en fait, je fais des codes dégueulasses en gros, pour tester tous les cas possibles. Du coup, dans ma test suite, normalement, je ne l'applique pas. Par contre, dans mon source directory, là, oui, je mets à fond, quoi. Mais c'est une très bonne question.
Merci Nuno, c'était vraiment une super presse. Nous, on a un code legacy qui est quand même assez énorme, un très très vieux projet qui est devenu notre API avec le coup. PHPSTAN ne tient pas parce que la mémoire explose. Est-ce qu'avec PHP Insight, ça serait capable de passer? Est-ce qu'il est plus performant?
Alors, je pense qu'on peut déduire deux questions de là-bas, parce que j'ai déjà aussi mis PHPSTAN dans un projet comme ça. Et en gros, il faut comprendre c'est où PHPSTAN ça pète. En gros, c'est l'arrive à interpréter toutes les classes. Tu peux aussi splitter l'analyse de code statique. Et tu vas folder par folder. Et comme ça, tu résous le problème de la mémoire. Par contre, vos PHP Insights, jusqu'à là, je n'avais pas besoin d'un gros projet, parce que je fais de bibliothèque en gros. Du coup, je ne peux pas te dire si ça va marcher ou pas. Je pense que ça va prendre du temps. À niveau mémoire, ça peut passer. Mais je ne suis pas sûr. Il faut essayer. Et après, tu me diras dans Twitter.
Merci beaucoup, Nuno.
Merci à tous.